the issues that we're having now. As they are the only country on this list without a major crisis staring them down, India again fulfills the rule I've posited of always being the country that's the exception to every rule. I was thinking about what witty quip I could make up for India's history like I did for Brazil and Russia, but fuck it. I spent an hour trying to explain Indian civilization, and I only feel like I cracked the surface. India is easily the most complicated country in the world, with hundreds of gods, castes, languages, ethnicities, and more. India was a chaotic civilization that skipped out on the axial age level.
Jesus Christ, look at that map, man. That is insane, dude. Wow. Dang, dude. Are these the tribes or just the certain areas, man? That's insane, dude. Holy snap.
Package of monotheism and bureaucratic empires, thus keeping the insane degree of complexity that the Bronze Age world had into the 21st century, while then being horrifically pwned by the Muslims and the British, who left them with the scaffolding of a modern democracy, bureaucracy, and science, with Gandhi providing the new spirit for the new republic. India went through a socialist phase in the Cold War era as a reaction to British hyper-capitalism, which caused tens of millions of death and famine. India remained deeply poor and was slated for mass famine, but with the invention of GMOs and the introduction of capitalism in the late 20th century, India was looking to be in pretty good shape at the start of this century. My researcher Seamus did a project on the Indian economy today, or what the fruits of modernization have been, and the results are really unique. Tropical countries like Brazil earlier tend to have incomprehensible bureaucracies that make mass coordination impossible, and this is what happened with India. Thus, India's actual industry has not grown at all in the last 40 years. Unlike the previous two countries, India
That's crazy that you're manufacturing as the Indian, like it hasn't grown in 40 years, so it's like pretty much stayed stagnant. Jesus Christ. DCC, who's the new Gandhi? I don't know, man. I don't know. Yikes, man. My ex was an immigrant from India. She was an orphan over there. After that map, she never had a chance of knowing her background. Dang, that's crazy. That's insane. But my God, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, this is terrible. But this is kind of one of the reasons why the United States worked so well is because now this is pretty fucked to say, but it's true and stuff. Basically, because there was a lot of open territory there. Obviously, they did a lot of atrocities to the Indians. So I'm not saying that and stuff, but Indians here in the United States, not in India. That was the British. But basically, because it was able to get all conquered and stuff, and the tribes were out of the way and stuff like that. Terrible thing to say, but it's just trying to say it. But like you're able to establish all these kind of rules and boundaries and stuff like that, and then allowed the United States not to have that much of a problem and stuff. So it's kind of crazy, man. And on top of that, with no natural enemies as well.
Does have rule of law, but its bureaucracy is so incomprehensible as to make big projects impossible. India's growth has been concentrated in services and its upper classes. This makes sense considering India's at least 5,000-year history of the caste system, which prioritizes the upper classes. India has really advanced technological sectors, service industries with despised call centers being an example, and all of that sort of thing. Strangely enough, for a process called industrialization, India has not seen a lot of industry and is being led by soft service industries. The report shows a disturbing picture of a two-tiered Indian society. As the movie The White Tiger, which is really fun to watch, says, those with bellies and those without. Most people in India, like almost all countries today, have not seen their standard of living improve at all in the last 40 years. In fact, mechanization stands to destroy India's peasant classes, without new factories arising to provide them jobs in the cities. And educational standards in Indian public schools have not improved at all in the last 40 years. India has all the preconditions of a severe social crisis that Turchin uses to predict revolutions and civil wars. This includes elite overpopulation or having lots of educated Indians unable to gain better jobs due to the top 0.1% getting more and more wealth. When elite aspirants can't get positions, you should be very worried since they get radicalized, start political crises, or flood my comment section with unhinged Indian nationalist comments. My favorite author, Amaury Duriancourt, wrote in the 60s that India was a country best positioned for fascism in the next century, and I agree with the Hindu nationalist BJP being a weak representation of this impulse. India is remarkably self-contained for a country of its massive scale of over a billion. It's self-sufficient for food, which is incredibly impressive, but it also barely trades with any of its neighbors and exercises basically negative foreign policy influence. Every single country neighboring India is a Chinese ally, with Bangladesh and Pakistan slated for Chinese naval bases. The Chinese are literally trying to dam up the water supply for northeast India or the Brahmaputra River. However, none of that's actually that bad, and of all the countries on this list, even if India has a civil war or becomes a
I don't know if it's not that bad. Damming a lot of water away from India, I don't think that's great. But I kind of get what he's saying right now. Is basically India is so used to being in the shitter that like it's gonna survive. Where like if there is a famine, like India's going to make it and stuff like that, and like the overall government structure is gonna survive. Versus where in China, if there's a famine, they're pretty fucked basically.
for northeast India or the Brahmaputra River. However, none of that's actually that bad, and of all the countries on this list, even if India has a civil war or becomes a fascist dictatorship, it's still the best positioned country here. It's the only one which is not having a major demographic crisis and will never have a resource or industrial crisis. India has never, ever been a great power, with Indian armies never attacking outwards once in the country's 4,000-year history. India's poor have always been poor and downtrodden and have no real expectations of anything else, meaning India can shove off and deal with major crises without breaking its social structure. Number 4, China.
That was some dark shit on India the last second, man. Holy crap. These people have been so poor that poorness doesn't affect them anymore. Poorness is like forever. Like, what the fuck, man? That's horrible.
I've already covered China in this video, and so I'm going to keep this one short. China is in the past by far the most impressive of the BRICS, being a literal economic majority of the entire BRICS net worth. And if you remove India, it has 3 times more people than all those other BRICS combined. If you want to judge off the historic record as well, China's an optimistic bet, being the largest economy and country in the world for almost all of human history. And China's economic growth over the last 40 years is the largest ever in all of human history. In 1976, China had a smaller economy than Spain, and is now by some metrics the largest in the world, surpassing even the United States. However, at the same time, China is experiencing what will become a massive dynastic and social collapse, which will consume them for decades, killing hundreds of millions. That's big talk, but let me show you why I think that. China has very strong fundamentals. It's 94% the same ethnicity, it's in the temperate zone, and its people are naturally educated, loyal, entrepreneurial, and hardworking. In any given profession, there is probably some part of China that is in competition to be the best area in the world at that thing, in the same way the US can do. The Communist Party liberalized in the late 20th century, and China is largely growing by importing Western industry. I remember looking at my toys and seeing all of them were made in China, and thus assuming China must be a great country. For the longest time, China was the country that made everything, although in recent years a combination of Southeast Asia and the US have been surpassing them. The Chinese were growing at an unbelievable rate, spawning technical sectors, truly massive cities, and all of that at a speed that no one could believe. Everyone thought the Chinese would take over the world, and it looked like this as well. China became a massive soft powerhouse, becoming the main influencer in most of Africa, Asia, and even parts of Latin America. The Chinese resurrected the Mongol Empire as an alliance against the American world order. In order to understand where the Chinese went wrong from this high point, we need to
resurrected the Mongol Empire and fucking failed, son. Failed. That's right. Failure, man.